teenagers with the skills necessary to succeed in today's world. Now, what that meant was that we actually put what we call a North Star metric for the brand. So there was a number attached that would be tracked for the vision statement. And in this case, they wanted to see how many kids, and though they were kids, so they needed to track that over time, would be then directly sort of hired in the companies of that nature. So first and foremost, if you're trying to build a brand and a story, you need to paint a picture of what that ultimate world is going to look like and how many people connect to that picture. However, if it's a blank claim, then we run into issues of authenticity. But if it is a claim tied to a number, and it's not a revenue number because your customer doesn't care about your bottom line, they care about what you stand for. If you're putting that number, chances are more people are going to connect to you, but then you also have more to talk about. So it helps you build that relationship with the customers. This is one. Point number two, so basically vision statement, first define and then dominate the market. Point number two, crafting your purpose. So while the vision is kind of how do you see the world, the purpose is why do you do what you do? And I'm bringing here two brands. How many of you know of these brands? And maybe how many of you know of these two campaigns? Maybe just hands up, because I think I might be going. All right, there's a few there. I see some videos and some not, so I'm not entirely sure. Oh yeah, there's some thumbs up. So I'll just explain briefly. So Dove, both these companies basically are within the beauty industry, and Dove brought about this purpose statement, which was to make beauty a positive experience for every woman, right? And what they did was basically for the first time in advertising industry, basically they brought in photos of bodies that weren't the preconceived, perfect, ideal sort of what a woman should look like. And because of this really created a huge social spark around the whole product, around Dove as a company. And they really stuck to this for a long time, and it has really worked well for them. But they were also sort of at the forefront of what was happening socially. Now, years later, Victoria's Secret tried to do a very similar campaign. They actually found that they lost quite a bit of money on it. And the reason why is because this sort of Victoria's Secret has historically stood for those beauty standards that they were trying to sort of reverse with this sort of with this idea here. And that becomes another issue of authenticity. So in order to not run into places like this, it's crucial for businesses to clarify, at least for founders, to clarify why they're doing what they're doing, right? Despite the product, but internally as an individual, what do you stand for and what do you not stand for? Why are you doing what you're doing? Because that will allow you to build serious and honest relationships with your customers. That when and if your product sort of has an issue, they will tell you because they trust you, right? And ultimately build that relationship, that strong relationship with the customers, right? So for me, for example, you know, Skins Agency lives the secret. If founders build successful, conscious first businesses. My first goal is to try to make my clients as conscious as possible with what they're doing, about what they're doing with their brands, about what they're doing with their companies, to the ultimate people. That's why there's so much research involved in our process. And so craft sort of the heartbeat of your business into one sentence. And the third one is to define your personality. So first layer is how do you see the world? Second layer is why do you want to do that? And then third layer is how do you do that? Every one of you, and I saw some of some of your faces here from the video, and I can definitely see there's some variety of people, that are coming in. And that just means that each of you has a very, very distinct personality, and that personality will reflect directly to the way that you do business. Now, if you can clarify that either from a personal perspective or from a company perspective, say, hey, I want my company to feel this way, to talk this way, then you've built the way that you can proliferate and push forward any of your marketing and brand materials. So, something similar to Microsoft and Apple, right? And I hope some of you remember this good old ad. Anyone? Yeah, there's a few that have really followed up on ads and ad trends. So, there was this ad where it was basically just trying to, in a mocking way, to show Microsoft and Apple as two humans, as two personalities. While Microsoft was this geeky guy with not a big sort of sense of humor, very much into utility, Apple was a lot more like laid back and was very much up for experience. So this is very important because it will help you build that distinctiveness with other companies in your market, right? So once you have these three layers, you will have built sort of the core of what your brand should look like, at least from your perspective, right? So with our clients, is to clarify like a specific example.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm hearing someone. I'm not sure if that's a question. All right, I'll move forward. So with this particular client, as I mentioned, they're a school teaching kids how to code. They used to look like this, but then we talked to the customers as well as to sort of the leaders of the company, and they gave us a different direction. They said, look, we want to look a little geeky, but also cozy, but also really fun. And so we went from this to this, and lately to this, right? So it's very important to bring the direction in, because regardless of how many times the styles and the trends will change in marketing, it's important to have the same look and feel. And I'll go back again to these basic examples. But when you think of Apple, regardless of how many times Apple has changed their colors or has changed and updated their website, in our minds, they still are the same brand. They still have the same look and feel. If we were to sort of try to describe Apple 20 years ago, maybe a bit later, but roughly that. And today, we'd still probably describe it in a very similar fashion when it comes to personality. Colors have changed, layouts have changed, design has changed, but the core of the personality of the brand has remained the same. Now, I'm not going to stop much longer in this, right? But just to clarify, in order to build that authentic core, you need your vision, your purpose, and personality. As to how to build these, you can just use the software. It's for free. So I didn't want to spend too much time. I just wanted to explain why these are important as a first sort of layer to your brand, which now we move towards customers. But before I do that, I just want to ask, is there any question? Does this sound right? Or do you have any other experience that you'd like to share in this respect? I'll stop sharing for a second and just open it up for conversation. Thanks, Catherine. Anyone, you can just unmute yourself. By the way, 28 people. I'm very happy about this. I'm happy people are interested in this topic. Any other comment? All right, we'll move on. All right, so second part, we go to the customer, right? So the first part was a bit more sort of high level. It's more about you as an individual as well as you as a company. This can work for personal brands as well as for company brands. It can be done through several founders or a single founder, or if you're a scaling company as the whole team, that that works as well. But when it comes to the customer, is the other side of the coin, right? Now we want to really connect with these people. We've built our personality. We understand our vision and our purpose statement, but now we need to translate that to our customers. And this is one of those challenging parts, right? So here's one way to do it, or maybe to explain it. If you're a technical founder, most probably you will understand so much about the product, but then once you start explaining your product to your target audience, it will, just sound like rocket science. And it's very hard to explain that. So even if you've clarified your tone of voice, but you go with that tone of voice to someone and speak such a technical language, it will be a really challenging conversation. Similarly, I mean, in the most basic sense, I'm from Kosovo. I speak Albanian. That's my native language. Had I not known English, you are my target audience, I wouldn't have been able to do this. So my tone of voice remains the same. My look and feel remains the same. My purpose statement and everything remains the same, but I really needed to learn this language. And so this is important, the important part of then being, empathetic towards the customers. And there's a few layers to this that I usually use in a repetitive manner. First is, how do I attract the attention? So the very first layer, the visceral layer, how do I attract the attention of my customers? And that is to design for them and not for us. And I know this sounds very cliche, but I'll bring you a specific example. Hopefully you can do the same for your companies. So here's an example. We worked with this organization. They were basically giving some funding to artists and some mentorship, but they were struggling to bring artists in to apply. Just by changing their look, their visuals, we reached 300% campaign success. And we did that by doing this. So first, we lay down what this customer is all about. So their target audience was local artists. They were financing and mentorship. That's what they were providing. But the issue was that NGOs were very rigid in the way the other NGOs in the market, so the competition, were very rigid in the way that they were basically putting out there all of these application forms. And these guys were quite opposite of that. They were bringing artists to be part of the jury. So what we did was we first looked at their previous campaigns. You see, and this is the general mistake that startups will make. Instead of looking at what what your audience needs, you look at your competition, right? So if I'm a developer, I will look at some other developer websites and I will design my product, which is for maybe fashion, but like it was a technological product. So that's what they did previously. I just looked at, some typical NGO designs, and this is their previous design. It looks very similar. What we did was, we were targeting artists. So what we did was we just looked at what was trending in artists' space at that time, and we designed something very similar to them. And, right away, 300% more conversion on this specific point. So the idea is you still keep your tone of voice and look and feel, but the way that you translate that should be built on top of what your audience is looking at. So the idea here is usually what I do is I'll find 5 to 10 of my potential customers that I just know of. I'll open their social media. I'll see what they liked in the past or what they've posted in the past. And I'll build a mood board based on those on that information. And that will help me understand the style, the direction, and the visual language to use. So in the second year, we did something similar. They said, look, we have enough artists, but we now need contemporary artists. All I did was I went to contemporary art galleries. I got the posters from there and then designed something very similar to that style. So again, tone of voice and look and feel was similar in terms of like the overarching personality. But visual direction was changing because our audience was changing with that. And if I asked these guys to describe the personality of this and these guys to describe the personality of this, I'm relatively sure I'll be getting the same keywords. And that's what's really important. So if you're doing this, go find some of your customers, look at what they posted recently, look at what they liked recently, build the mood board from there, or maybe talk to them and ask them, hey, what are the fashion brands that you follow? What are the fashion influencers that you follow? What is that taste? And let's say you want to be a little funky, but maybe also a little serious. So then you'll ask those questions. Who are those serious influencers and who are those that are more funky to you as a customer? You get those and then you try to replicate that as a style, and it really helps you connect with the language that your audience is speaking. So that was the first one. Practically, the previous experience of your customers should determine the emotion and the taste that you're gonna circulate around your visual identity. From there, then the idea is to give it the right meaning, right? So we take the tech specs and then we build a feeling around your tech specs. It's what do your customers feel after they've utilized your product? And so from there, here's another example of some clients of ours. This is a sort of horse racing company. They train horses, and people can purchase a share in a racehorse. So basically, democratizing the horse racing industry. They build all of these different parts of the product. They will have to train the horses. They find trainers. There's a lot of technical issues around this. But the way that we sold it was own a piece of the action, right? So we put together all these tech specs. And then we brought the product to the customers and understood that basically all they want to do is feel like an owner and be part of that action. And so we got these 2 keywords. So this is the whole point here is we try to understand, removing all the tech specs from vocabulary, how would we describe the end benefit? And so this is part of the value prop, but also connects directly to our tone of voice. So in this case, another basic example from the industry here, but I'm relatively sure you'll be familiar with this. So Slack, on their first campaign 10 years ago, And again, we're talking about brand campaigns, so not conversion rate campaigns. This is their product. It's very, very sort of technical. Obviously, it's a software, but this was their campaign. It was what it feels like to sit in 25% fewer meetings, right? And so even from the look and feel perspective, the lady here very much is on that demographic of their target audience. This came from the memes of that time. And everything about this talks about feeling, and very little to none about this talks about features. And so in general, if you kind of are struggling to figure out what feeling do my or could or would my customers feel, I've grouped these in three general groups. Now, there's certainly more than this, but just as a general rule of thumb, there are three core types of products that solve a problem, products that help customers get better looks, and this is generally in the fashion industry, and then three products that save some time. So generally, and again, not always, this is just what I found, and hopefully you can utilize this. If your product is solving a problem, then most likely it means that somebody's not getting fired over that problem that you're solving. So you're giving that calm feeling. Funny enough, then later doing the research, I found the sort of this ad, and it really connects with, especially with the time saved here. So if it gives people better looks, it generally means that it's a status issue, right? Or they become part of a movement. So it's an identity issue. And you can definitely use the part of like, oh, if you are like this and you don't believe in that, you can utilize this product. So this really can support you in building that closer connection to your audience. Finally, if it's time saved, means more time with family, or more time doing fun stuff. So it's happiness. And so that's why I suppose also Slack did this. The lady looks very happy, and thus, because she's saving 25% of her time or of her meetings. And then finally, you bring this all down to a story. So this is where consistency comes in. You make sure that you take the vision that you've built, you take the reason why you're doing what you're doing, your purpose statement, you get your personality, and then you've understood all your customers and how they communicate, and you turn that into the story that you're going to share across all your sales journey. Now, there's going to always be this conversation, do I repeat things or do I go in depth? The idea is you repeat things within one part of the funnel. So for example, if you're building awareness, you're going to be repeating probably one or two or three messages over and over and over again. But then once people go to interest or consideration, you need to give them a bit more depth. And to know how to talk to them, then you bring your purpose statement in, then you bring your vision statement in, and then people will connect to you in that layer, right? And then if you struggle with saying, look, it's very cringy for me to go and do this sort of type of social media, then if you know what your vision is, and if you know what type of look and feel and tone of voice feels comfortable to you, then you find the media that feels comfortable to you, but then talk it with the language of your audience. And chances are you're going to have a much closer and more authentic conversation than you would otherwise if you tried the wrong media, or rather the media you're uncomfortable with a message that doesn't connect with what you're trying to say, right? So I think in being more and more close to what you believe is your way of doing things, chances are you're going to have higher success rate. I'll get personal on this a little bit, but for me, like I'm the worst at social media, but workshops and talking to people is really fun. And so, because I teach at a couple of universities, and it's really fun for me to sort of have these conversations, I do this instead, right? And honestly, it has helped me build some really cool relationships, and I've been able to sort of connect with accelerators and startups and companies across the world. And this has been really cool for me. And I can repeat this. I can do these workshops over and over again. They're relatively scalable. I can teach some people to get this material, to do this workshop, and I maybe don't need too many ads. So this is where it comes down to that personality layer I spoke about at the beginning. for bottom of the funnel and just trying to convert, but then you're not building that brand loyalty, and then your customers are not really connecting with you. They're buying a product, they don't know why they bought it, maybe they like it once, but they're not buying into the story and into why you're doing what you're doing. So this is where this boils down to. That said, with this process, we've helped companies, like Digital School that I mentioned, go from a very small local company to 25 countries, 500 locations. So the idea is if you do this right at the beginning, then you can really scale this up as you hire more people. Similarly, this company, the horse racing company, they're in the UK. They started as an idea stage business, just like they had a successful crowdfunding. Now they're the second largest business in their industry in the UK. And constantly we keep getting this feedback from their customer. They got tens of thousands of customers now, that the brand is something that they really, really connect with. But also the team has been very authentic in actually bringing, because they joke a lot. But the idea is the founders managed to find a way to also hire people who have a great sense of humor. And that ties so well to the tone of voice that they can proliferate this message and this brand really well. So if you do that well at the beginning, you will then have a much easier way to hire the right people, do the right marketing, and build the right relationships. So ultimately, have a look at all of these three. Make sure that you've done the work with yourselves first, clarified where you are, what do you build, what do you stand for, and if you are to make close friends with your customers, what would that story be? What would your story towards them be? Second, how do you translate that story to your customers in their language? Just to translate it. It's not to make it something else. It's not to change from who and what you are. It's just about doing it in a way that they understand. And then finally, learning from the competition so that you don't stay behind and you get your positioning and your space in the market. So for any of you that actually wants to build this whole U part, the website is brandpack.us, and then you'll receive the code from Astrid. You'll be able to go through purpose, vision, values, positioning, brand personality, and competition. So it should help you with your pitch decks as well as with connecting with your audiences and build some social media content as well, by the way. The tool will automatically generate some social media content for you to just understand what you can do with it. It will be free until Monday. So feel free to use this as fast as you can. And if you need any help, I'll be in support, answering any questions for now. This is it for me. I try to go relatively fast, so I leave some time for questions and answers. I'm sorry if I've been too fast with this, but now I'll stop sharing and we'll wait for your feedback and any questions. Thank you, Jasmine. Yes, Vaughn, I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you so much. Excellent presentation, and thank you for taking the time to share this with us. So overall, I think I'm where I need to be in terms of brand strategy. I think where I will need some assistance is in terms of what's the next step when you believe you're ready for retail.
Okay, well, when you're ready for retail, there's a couple of things. You're going B2C. Chances are you're not going to meet most of your customers, right? And so that's a bit of a challenge because it's scary. It's like what will resonate, right? I would say, I'm a big believer in testing things out before they go out. So I would do first of all, if you're very insecure about what's going to work, I would just do some campaigns, throw them out, not in terms, I know you're going retail and probably it's a tangible product, but I will throw some stuff in social media just to see what gets more views and more clicks, just to see what people that are within my demographics connect to better, what kind of imagery, what kind of messaging, right? If you want to test that out. And then once you have that, you throw it in, but make sure that you're doing customer interviews as often as possible. Build some layer and some mechanism for feedback, right? Most of these chains, the big food chains, KFC and McDonald's and the likes, will give you a big discount if you fill in a form, right? Or we'll give you a free ice cream if you fill in a form. I think it's worth the money to give people something for free to get great feedback at as early as possible. So that's one. And two is I really think that, I understand there's a lot of fluff around this idea of brand, and there's a lot of fluff around the idea of having a purpose statement and having a vision statement. But ultimately, especially in retail, we can clearly see how the strongest brands are the ones that stand very firm towards their beliefs and their belief system, right? So their values, and so clarify those, chisel those out. And that sometimes means putting yourself in tough situations because you really need to go the extra mile internally to clarify those values and what those mean for you. And that means, by the way, in a lot of brands and personal brands specifically, we'll do sort of the hero, but we'll also do the nemesis. And so you kind of need to, in a way, clarify your nemesis, what you don't stand for. And that puts you in some waters to be in, in some layer of conflict with some people. You don't need to voice that out, but it really helps you organize yourself around a particular belief system, if I may, and people will connect to something that's as authentic. I believe, and I might be very wrong here, by the way, but seeing from all the brands that I've worked with, being a little tough on what you believe in will take that extra mile for you in terms of building that relationship with customers. So that boldness is somewhat necessary, especially in this world where authenticity is such an issue, because we're trying to be careful about everything, and we should be, but then you have your beliefs. And I think those can really echo in your brand. And that's what builds that strong relationship. And ultimately, if you have some close friends, think about what you guys stand for, right? And that kind of stuff, that's what builds that bond. So you need to build a similar bond with your people out there, with your customers.
Thank you so much. So we've been in business for over 4 years, so I think most of those milestones we've already achieved.
Okay, perfect.
We are currently selling on some e-commerce platforms, and I think this is just expanding our market space.
Okay, so let me give you then this example, and this may help, may not help. With that school, what we've done, they were in the market for right about your time, so 3-4 years. They'd gotten a bit of a footing in the local market, nothing internationally, very little. So what we did was we talked to them, and they were like, oh, our product is great because our curriculum is the best. But then when we talked to the students, they were like, look, we come here because we're geeks at school. Everybody bullies us. When we come here, we're programmers. We know each other's jokes. We have internal jokes. And now all of a sudden I can go on TV interviews and I don't care anymore. So what we did was, instead of pushing for the great curriculum, we split the school in houses, Harry Potter style. And then we build an online learning system that's now turning into a full gaming platform where they can learn. But that increased, so that grew them by 30% in a single month, completely organically, right? So if you already have that experience, and I'd love to chat more about this because this is the timing where I could possibly really help. I definitely say get some customers in one place and listen why exactly they're buying the product. I understand they'll talk about utility, but if you can bring them to the point where they talk about that emotion that's keeping them so close to you, and then you translate that into your value prop, this is where you split your product with your brand. And then product is part of the brand, but the brand becomes bigger than the product itself. And I think this is the real time when you can get that huge amount of scale, where you flip from your product, or like from a small company to this larger company. And they had about 1,000 students in total. They have, I think, about 15,000 active right now, or something like that, right? So we're talking 1,000 students in 4 years versus 15,000 active right now. And growing, I think even much more now. We're making the strategy for much larger. So I'd really say, if you can nail down what is the internal emotional value your customers are getting versus the product value and value prop, you can really make that big switch. Sorry, I took too long to answer that, but how does that? I love that, Catherine. How does this affect service-based industry? Welcome to my world. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm in the service business, right? I have a branding company, and for me, here's how it's helped me. First, I have a lot of people that come to me and say, look, I need a great logo. And I'm saying, I'm sorry, this is not a good fit. For a great logo, there's a designer that will do this for like $1,000. That's perfect. My ticket size starts at 30, 50K, right? Exactly. But how can I charge that much when they're getting a logo from me and they're getting a logo from another designer that costs $1K or maybe $200, right? And what I've done is I've clarified and I've said this, look, if you go to the designer, you'll be the, creative director, and they'll just listen and they'll execute. If that's the stage you're at, that's perfect. But if you're like Vaughn, for example, who's done all that, but now you need support on a strategic level, right? If you need a shoulder that will help you carry the weight as opposed to someone who's going to execute, I'm the guy for you, right? And so this is why I don't say necessarily, look, I do brands, but like I'm your shoulder to cry on. And this is where most of the CEOs will come to me and say, yes, please. Because like I'm tired and I'm done of telling everybody what to do. I need someone who will tell me what to do with this brand. And I'm that guy. And this is where for the service industry is important. I never said brand in this conversation. I just said I'm the guy that will take that responsibility, because I'm in the business of sort of taking responsibility, and I'm not in the business of designing. So it's that emotional switch, right? From value prop of the product to the emotional switch that your customer gets is a huge shift. And believe me, I've charged $200 for a logo when I started as a designer, but now I charge that, right? And at least that, and it goes much higher than that. So I've done that switch just because I've been able to, build on value prop, but also communicate it in a way that it qualifies out a lot of people. But then those that are qualified, they will pay that money without thinking twice, because it's such like, $50K is something you would pay a designer full time in your company for like maybe a year, and you'll never get a 10th or 100th of the value that you get for 3 months with that work with me. And so it's 100% worth the value. So you don't even think about that twice. So they don't think about the money because I said, I'll take the responsibility from you. And so that's so much higher. So it will change your pricing. It will change your positioning. It will allow you to build that type of relationship with your customer that otherwise your product page would not do. So generally, the service industry is very hard to scale otherwise, unless you're increasing your pricing or you're hiring a ton of people. So either or, it will create some layer of value that you can translate into a brand message.
Excuse me, whenever you have time, since I said I'm driving, I won't be able to write anything in the chat. But
Yes.
Whenever you get a chance, I would like to pose my question.
Please go ahead. I think there's no questions in the chat, so you can go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the valuable information you are providing. You were mentioning in making branding, you should say what you're not standing for. I understand how you can say what you stand for, but how can you say what you don't stand for a product such as my product, like tea? I was thinking about it, and then I couldn't come up with much about what I don't stand for, and mentioning it, in my branding.
So what you don't stand for doesn't necessarily need to be at the forefront of your messaging, but it certainly helps when you're at a particular position, and it helps when something in society happens that you can utilize as a marketing stunt as well. So for example, I understand that the tea industry, insofar as I know now, there's a bit of an export happening of tea from this country, and so I understand some of the issues, but very little to none. So I will take some assumptions, and please take them with a grain of salt. They're assumptions, and I don't know much about the industry. But I'm going to have to assume that some of the tea around the world is being produced by people in bad conditions, in bad working conditions, right? And potentially you as a brand, if you're importing tea from, maybe people that and maybe farmers that are family businesses or something like that, then you can say, look, we stand for tea that is ethically produced, and we stand against non-ethical work environment for, other tea producers. So that could be something that will help you sort of also in your branding, because even in your packaging, just saying that you get your tea and your sort of raw material from ethically produced or ethically managed spaces already says enough about what you don't stand about, right? So you don't necessarily have to say it out loud, but if, for example, there's news about something, some sort of bad conditions in a particular area, then you can say, well, we stand against that because as a company, ever since the beginning, we've stood for good, sort of from, you know, companies that provide good opportunities for the farmers out there, right? So I think you can definitely utilize the contrast, but just by understanding it, it helps you. So for example, I'll give you my example, and this is in the service industry. But for me, and this is not necessarily what I stand against, but nevertheless, it might paint a picture. As a company, we refuse to work with religious organizations. We refuse to work with political organizations. And the reason we do that is because we understand people's psychology so much, and we've noticed how much we can change people's behavior through our work, that we refuse to do something for these two types of organizations simply because we don't understand how far along their policies can change people's lives. I understand how much I can convince people to change their orientation about a product, but I don't want to do that about a political party because I don't understand how far along their agendas go. So I publicly stand against working with them. Not that I don't vote, I'm not an anarchist, but I just, as a company, we don't work with political parties, and we don't work with sort of religious institutions just because we're afraid of how our work could be utilized because of our lack of understanding of it, right? And so I'm public about this, but I don't sort of dangle it around. It's just a matter of when the conversation comes to that, I'll say, look, that's as far as we can go. I appreciate that, but we don't do that. And so it allows us as a company to slowly be positioned in a particular group of companies, and so on and so forth. So I know this is an abstract answer, but I hope it kind of helps in your question.
Definitely, and thank you very much. Your examples were great. This might not be a question, but a request. Is there any possibility that you could share your presentation later on, or keep the relationship conversation, whatever, after this presentation? It's great. You have really valuable information that I would definitely want to continue, and somewhere along the way, definitely will pay you for your services.
I appreciate that. And of course, like I will then ask Astrid to share with you after this. So I'll share, Astrid, the link to the presentation and also to my LinkedIn and to my email. So you can directly reach out to me. I'd really love to connect and continue the conversation. Also, for all of you thinking of using the application, you can go ahead and start using it right away. You know, the paywall is later, and then by then Astrid should maybe just give you that link. You can utilize it throughout the weekend for free. And then after that, if you need any further support, either on your visual identity or messaging or anything like that, or diving deeper into those conversations, I'd love to hop either on a call, and then we can discuss further. As I said, I've gotten a lot of value from SeedSpot, so it's time for me to sit and have these conversations, and I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Of course. Is there any other supposedly last question? I think we have 6 minutes left. I want to ask Katie, did I manage, if she's still around? Is she? Katie, do we have you here?
Yes, I'm here.
So did I somewhat manage to answer your challenge with, you know, selling without feeling cringy? Am I saying that right? Cringy? Yeah.
Thank you for circling back on that. I would actually love to hear your thoughts on, for example, my brand's positions around bringing like a human element to the job search. Because a lot of times, especially like, you know, with tech bro career services, it just feels very like performative and maybe values misaligned, especially for folks who are in the social impact space. So I try to bring like a warmth and kindness and community orientation and just a more human approach. And I can acknowledge this tension of like, this group earns lower salaries in general. And the tension, I don't know how, I'm just going to say it, but like capitalism doesn't value humans in the way that it values other things. So I just feel this tension of like, the brand is about community and connection and supporting those making the world a better place. So anytime I go to make an ask or price or write an email that has my products in it, I just don't know how to balance that tension, because selling feels like I'm putting profit before people, and it just feels a little icky.
So, oh God, like ask like almost any designer or artist, they will tell you exactly this story. I don't know why we're wired that way, that it feels so hard to talk about pricing and money. It's just, it feels like God. So I know the feeling very well. I hope I can bring some words to it, and at least here's something that has helped me personally. So I've done design for, ever since I was 14. I'm 33 now. It's been a while. I had to work since then, so that's life. And for the longest of time, I've just done design for the sake of design, right? And then I've sold it and I exhibited around Europe. It was great. But I sat down and I was like, wait, I'm doing this great work. Designers think it's amazing, but are my clients getting their money's worth? And this is where this whole psychology-based and evidence-based design came to play for me, because I needed to put numbers to the work that I was doing. I needed to make sure that I was actually bringing value to my customers. Otherwise, I felt exactly like that. I felt like I was just ultimately then doing the same thing. So I think it's important to take a while to understand the real value that you're providing for these companies. Now, I come from a post-communist country. Now it's a very capitalist country. I've seen parts of both sides of the coin. There are goods and bads for both. What I love about the capitalist mindset is that exchange of value is straightforward. And it is, I believe, to a certain degree, more honest than it is in more sort of socialist countries. However, the human element, exactly as you mentioned, is missing. And so what you're bringing, I think, is exactly what people in these industries are craving for, but generally speaking, is very tough to talk about. And so we distance ourselves. So I believe that your value prop there is very strong, but also because it is strong and because it brings value, there is no reason why it shouldn't be compensated. And so I would definitely argue that it's about you potentially being able to sit down and put numbers to the value that you're bringing. And that might feel a little tough, but ultimately we're building businesses. And if you find, for me, someone who's a great fit for my team, believe me, that person is going to bring a hell of value to me. And if you're the person that I can actually call instead of just like a chat bot and I'm trying to filter through CVs, to be honest, I value that more than anything else. And I'm willing to pay for that because I know that, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into finding the person that I fit best with. And I'm willing to pay for that because it has value, not because you're scamming me, but because you're bringing me a value that no software can bring to me. And I feel like just extracting the number amount of that value is a conversation that needs to happen, but that it has value shouldn't be the conversation. And I think that's sort of the struggle that you kind of need to go through. And I'm not sure if I'm answering the question at all, but I'm just trying to explain how I've done it for myself. I just try to, see what my customers are getting. Am I charging 1/10 of what they're getting? If so, perfect. And I think Clement has raised his hand, hopefully can add a bit to this conversation.
No, please finish this one.
So basically that, and I hope I answered the question somewhat, at least.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Of course. I'd love to continue the conversation, by the way, and I can walk you through how I've done it for myself in more detail, if that helps. So you can just reach out on LinkedIn, and then we can have another call. Yeah, Clement, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the presentation, first of all. I understand that you have this brand pack, which would be like kind of a next step, and then you have your company, which I totally understand why you value it at the price you mentioned before. What would you recommend for really startup as an intermediate step, let's say, between the two?
So for very early stage startups, I think it's time for you to build your product and to find a way to sell it. So try to do it with zero money. If you're putting money in it, unless it's very much B2C and you need to really put some money in it, you can get something on Fiverr, on Upwork. I would go with the cheapest possible thing you could do, because it is not worth your money yet until it is proven that it's worth putting some money in it. I've spent a lot of money building products that I never sold. and I wouldn't want to see that on any on any founder. That said, that would be the first one. Second, once you start selling a bit, I would say you would need to spend somewhere between $1,000 to $5,000 at least. We're doing some packages for early stage startups. We've gotten some sort of templates ready to build a visual identity at least, and then the product itself, it should be cheap enough for you guys to, you know, get that rolling. And then anything above that, then we talk a different price. If you need some help on that, and you know you got a limited budget, feel free to write me on LinkedIn. Let me know where your budget is at, and then I can maybe help you organize it either through some freelancers that I know here that could support you, or through Upwork. Or if there's something that we can take on, then we'll take it on and we'll do something. That would be, you know, that's something that we can discuss. Nevertheless, if you're early stage, honestly, use some AI tools, try to do it the cheapest way possible until you've actually started selling. You know, someone here said, I'm still selling it to my friends, is giving it a try. That's what I would do, right? Just do it like that, mock it up until people say, oh, you know, here's $5 for it, whatever that is. I don't know the product.
Yeah.
Then for
No,
that
thanks.
$5, add another 10 or another 50 on your design and your brand.
Thank you.
Of course. Cool.
I'm sorry. I was trying to raise my hand, but I can't find the button here.
Go for it. By the way, Astrid, can we go a bit over time?
Yeah, sure. We can give it a few minutes. If you have to hop, no problem. If not, I'm sure we have many questions.
Yeah, then, well, I'm around, so feel free. By the way, for those of you using the product, please, the testimonial would be super helpful. So once you finish, it would be super helpful for me to just know sort of what happened and what your experience was. Thank you, Willie. Sorry, who wanted? I think it was
Simone.
Simone, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So something you said earlier really resonated with me, which was kind of how our product impacts our customers emotionally. So I am a florist, and essentially what I'm doing is it's a floral experience company where I'm hosting design classes that bring people together, promote creativity, bring joy to the community. So that's kind of the premise of my business. And, you know, we're just starting. We've gotten kind of basically foundational thing organized, and we're just starting to basically launch these classes. So in your opinion, after we've acquired a customer or have these experiences with our customer, what is the best way to kind of gather that data that you were talking about and really make sure we understand the customer as we move forward in the journey?
I love that. And I mean, in your case, I feel like this might be a little easier because you build these workshops. So do you sort of have an interface directly with your customers as they're going through that workshop experience?
Yes.
Perfect. So, you know, I love to, even at the end of this, and what I did constantly here, and of course, it's a bit more challenging in this setting, but I try to make it interactive. I try to ask, hey, am I going too fast, too slow? It doesn't necessarily mean that I can fix it right away, but it will definitely help me fix on the next one. I'll gather the questions that I had today here, and then I'll do that for the fix for the next thing. I will definitely, what I would do in your case as well is ask people right as they're leaving what their experience was, and then wait for like a week or something, and then ask them, hey, what happened in the last week that the workshop may have sort of changed in your life, right? And I would feel free, if you're building this for the brand, I would feel free to do sort of some abstract questions, not very directed to some KPI, but rather just say, you know, what was the feeling that you were left with, right? Or a week from the workshop, do you still have some lingering feelings from that experience? What are those, right? Or how did you use that information? Or, you know, that kind of stuff. I would definitely continue. Ultimately, if you've done this enough times, I would invite these people for a focus group. So I'll get one person or two people from each workshop or something like that. I would sit on a sort of focus group, and I could say, look, I'll give you a free extra workshop if you sit with me for an extra hour or 30 minutes so that we can discuss about stuff. And then talk to them or talk with them about what were those what did they feel like across that experience, so they can gather those insights and bring those keywords into your brand. Because it's kind of like, again, I'm going back to the friends conversation. It's kind of like with your friends, you know, they will tell you what kind of person you are, but they will never say unless you ask very honestly, because they'll shy away. They're trying to, you know, not hurt your feelings. And so it's important to create that environment with your customers that they can't hurt your feelings, so to say, because that's the most honest conversation. And if they do, then you have gold in your hands in terms of your brand. So
Love it. Thank you so much.
of course. And, you know, it's interesting because I feel like people do a lot more for each other than we give people credit for. So they will most probably say, yeah, like if there are people that love these workshops and flowers, like, you know, I have a 20 by 20 room here, but I have about 20 plants or 20 some. So for me, if I've come to your workshop, I would have probably just like come with you for another half an hour at least and sit and just be all about it, right?
Mhm.
So it's just part of, like, I love plants, and then why wouldn't I? Because it's my favorite conversation anyway, probably.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's not gonna feel like a chore. And if you make it not feel like a chore, and I always go back to Tom Sawyer, who, you know, who's kind of made to paint this fence. And then his friend comes, I think Huckleberry Finn, if I'm not mistaken. And then, you know, he says, oh no, I'm never giving you the brush. I'm never giving you the brush. And so he begs him to take the brush and then leaves the chore with Huckleberry Finn, because all of a sudden he didn't make it sound like a chore. He made it sound like it's exclusive. So if you make it sound like, hey, it's a conversation about flowers, something that we both love, then people will love to come. You just pose it like that, and as opposed to it's a chore, would you do it for me? So
Right.
that kind of stuff helps a lot with people,
Thank you so much.
of course. All right. Any other
Right,
questions?
Shah, we are well over time, but I'm glad. I love to see the questions. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Laura, for the wisdom, the magic. Definitely see the strategic vision there. We'll send some resources, and we're always open for questions. So everyone give a big thank you to Laura for joining us, and again, just sharing all your time and resources.
Thank you, everyone. And really appreciate all the thanks in the comments as well.
Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.